All right, everyone. Welcome to the Witness Business Podcast. We have on our show today Sarah Michelle. Sarah Michelle is a sort of a celebrity in the nursing community, or at least the nursing practitioner community, with her NP coaching courses, NP school, but we'll get into that. So, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. We were just talking about I like to classify myself as a mini celebrity, but only in my teeny tiny corner of the internet. Hopefully, maybe one day in the future, spread the message. But
you're a huge celebrity within a small community, but celebrity
with,
nonetheless.
Kyle's wife.
Hey, Kyle's wife.
I have been the one thing that she did tell me to tell you though is, I hear that you're the real deal.
I say that incessantly almost. We have a trademark for "you will pass," so I say "you will pass" a lot. That's really cool. And the other thing is always real deal nurse practitioner, real deal nurse. So it's fun. I like everybody classifying themselves that way.
She specifically told us to tell you that you're the real deal.
The real deal. Well, I appreciate that very much.
So before we get really in depth here, one question we've been asking all of our guests lately to kind of break the ice and get us started here is, what is the worst job you've ever had, and how did it maybe play a role in the success you've seen today?
The worst job I've ever had by far, like without a doubt about it, is when I was a freshman in college. I did the catering, and they only hired two students to be on the catering team. It was like all these older adults and then me and one other student. But I went to college, and all of a sudden, instead of going to all the freshman events, I was catering all the freshman events. And there was like all this back and forth because I was like, I just want to go to a couple. Like, I just want to like experience college like all the other freshmen are experiencing college right now. And I would be out to like 2 a.m. doing catering, and it was absolutely not for me in any way. So much so that I was like, I'm going to go work fast food now instead of doing catering. So I ended up working at Chick-fil-A, which, by the way, was a wonderful experience and a full turnaround.
So it was your pleasure?
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. All the time. My pleasure. I had to, like, uningrain that from my soul.
Well, that's great. Food services, I can testify. Well, Kyle and I actually have a history of working at McDonald's together, which is not Chick-fil-A. I can imagine Chick-fil-A being even though they're in the same category, Chick-fil-A at least having, the upper edge on maybe employee satisfaction. Because we'd probably both say
fried chicken, so.
Yeah, we'd probably both say McDonald's is at least in our top 2 or 3 worst jobs that we've ever had.
That's fair.
But yeah, catering and taking away from like college time, like time to be a kid in college, like, I could see that being very frustrating. So, moving on, the theme of the show, right, is we want to know, people come onto this show with a big idea that they actually did something with. So I have a big idea, and I don't know step one. I don't know how to get the idea out of my head and into the world. You had an idea as a nurse, to create some study materials, and ultimately you went on to sell your company. Like, a lot happened in the span of a couple of years where you just had the idea and suddenly, like, you've sold a company successfully. So can you just give us a quick, like, how did that happen? How did you get the idea? And then, like, how did that transpire into, holy cow, like, things are moving so fast?
Yeah, there's a lot of layers here, but I always like to start by telling people, like, I just leaned into being a beginner. Like, there was never a moment where I'm like, this has to be perfect to start out with. Like, I'm so excited about this. I'm so passionate about it. I want to get it out here. But really, the original idea came as I was preparing for my own board exam, because I was doing tons of review courses, and you just have to like think about the time, because it was right in the prime of COVID. Like, it was May 2020, April 2020 when I was preparing for boards. And so all of these old school review courses that were traditionally like 2-day conferences, like you'd travel a couple hours away, you do 2 10-hour days, and then you'd be done, are now pivoting online. And that, like, in person to online pivot is hard to execute, and they were having to do it like on a turn of a dime. And so when I did my first review online like that, it was 2 10-hour days. I literally fell asleep in the middle of the second day, and I was like, this isn't it. Like, I can't even keep myself invested in this. I'm just being taught at. And really what I found myself searching for as I did more and more and more review courses, I felt like I was doing every review out there, as I was just searching for confidence, and I wasn't finding that confidence anywhere. And so the first time that the idea really kind of sparked is my friend invited me to a Facebook group where somebody did a little Facebook review course. And I mean, it was like super short. They had some stuff on YouTube, but I was already teaching online at the time. I was teaching some clinicals on Zoom for nursing students, like nursing students getting their bachelor's degree. And so I was already learning how to teach online, and I was seeing like what my students liked and what they didn't. And so when I saw this girl doing an online review course, I was like, it's not that far out of the realm of what I've already done. And I hadn't even really found what I was looking for to begin with from a review course. So I was thinking about it. I was marinating on it, but it wasn't anything like, I'm going to go do this today sort of thing. That moment kind of came for me when I took my nurse practitioner board exam, because I went in there, it's 175 questions. I took it in less than an hour, which is just asinine. And I remember when I walked out, I was like, that was one of the easiest exams I've ever taken in my life. So I did like 6 review courses. I poured like tons of time, tons of money, tons of effort into all this. And none of those reviews gave me what I was looking for. I was like, I just wanted a review to be like, you know your stuff, you're going to be the real deal, you're going to be able to take this exam and pass this sort of thing. So as I was sitting in my car after taking the exam, because I was waiting for my friend to get out, we took it together, I was like, I just feel like I should try it out. Like, maybe I'll just like throw an outline together or a study guide. It hadn't even evolved yet to really being videos. So I was like, maybe just like highlight some things that you need to know before you take the exam. And then by the time I got home, I was just like, I'll just keep working on this outline. I'll see what comes of it. And within like 3 days, I had made a 3-hour course. Like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Go ahead.
How old were you at the time?
I was 25.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. Well, you also got to think I was 25 and my nurse practitioner degree was my 3rd degree. So I really loved school, almost obsessively so. And so it was kind of my jam. And I was already teaching nursing students even at 25, which was also kind of crazy in its own right, because a lot of times my students would be older than me. But I'm like, I'm here. Like, I'm showing up to teach you sort of thing. But with it being COVID times, I had more free time than I'd ever had in my life, because leading up to that year before COVID hit, I was working every weekend as a nurse. I was doing clinicals for nurse practitioner school 3 days a week, and the other days of the week I was teaching nursing students. And so when COVID hit and everything shut down, I left my nursing job. All my nurse practitioner clinicals shut down. They're like, okay, you've done enough hours, you can go take the test. And all of my teaching that I was doing with nursing students pivoted online. So I was kind of in some ways like looking for ways to fill time, because I had always been so busy. I didn't know how to live my life any other way. And so I was like, I'll just create a review course. I'll see what happens. I'll give it to my classmates for free. And so it was within less than a week of like, I think I might do this. And I was like, I really think I'm going to do this. And then I gave it away to students for free. And my husband was just like, you do you. Like, I remember when I was creating the course, like he desperately wanted a smoker at the time, but we couldn't afford it. Like, we were always like dollar to the dollar sort of thing. So he was like outside on Memorial Day weekend building a smoker out of cylinder blocks. And I'm like upstairs watching him from the window, trying to like type up this course, and then recording it in the middle of the night so people wouldn't hear my dogs barking on the Zoom recordings. So it was very fast, but I just really, really, really leaned into being a beginner, and like, I don't have to have this all figured out. This doesn't have to be a fancy business right from the start. Like, when it started, it was Zoom recordings. My 30 classmates, I gave it to for free. And you paid me on Venmo and Cash App when I first started to charge for it. So there was nothing sophisticated about it.
And so, hold on, let me gather my thoughts for a second. What was the time investment, like, to get that first initial freebie course off the ground? About how many hours would you say you put into this course?
I would say probably, and this is going to sound crazy. I mean, it was less than 100 hours. But I mean, within like the span of a week, I just worked on it, worked on it, worked on it. Like when I wasn't working, I worked on this course because I was like so lit up and excited about it. And it was like so fun for my creative brain to try to create a course in a different way too, because I think like that's what you have to understand about my courses at their premise is everyone else is lecturing to you. But my original course was literally just me like asking questions. So you could like pause at home, answer for yourself, like, do I know this? Do I not know this? And then I would give you the answer and I would give you tips on how you could build your confidence in knowing that answer. And so it was just a lot of fun for me to make. And so I was like literally up in the middle of the night making this course with all the time that I had because it was fun.
At face value, it's like 100 hours. Wow. Like that's super fast. But at the same time, I was kind of thinking about it practically. And it's like you have been encountering this information and kind of letting it wash over you over and over and over again to the point where it's just so ingrained that your recall was probably near instantaneous, right?
Yes, it was crazy.
I'm
And I
also
just took the exam. I'm fresh. Like I just studied for all the things.
I'm also laughing because of your whole the comment about the buying the smoker, and it made me think of something I was just talking with Steve about recently. It was like, welcome to your late 20s and early 30s, where you now have to choose a passion as a man. You either want to smoke meat or you're passionate about American history. Those are your two choices. So he
My
made
husband
his
goes both
pick.
directions.
Really, probably me too, if we're being honest. But you kind of talked about you were giving it away for free, and then you kind of get into the point where you realize, hey, you could go ahead and slide me some money on Venmo or Cash App. When did it really start to click that it's like, this is something that I could actually monetize if I wanted to?
So I, looked at the other Facebook review courses that were selling. They were all selling for like low dollar amounts, like $20 here, $40 here, etc. And so I decided that I was going to give it away to my 30 classmates for free if they would invite one person into my Facebook group. And then I gave it away to the first 100 students for free because I really just wanted feedback and I didn't want to charge anyone for it if it wasn't what people were looking for. Because there was also like this idea of I've created a course that's geared at test anxiety, which is a test taker like me. But not everyone out there has test anxiety. And so like, well, this vibe with everyone. I don't know if it's going to vibe. I hope it does. But it started taking off really fast. And so by the time I got 100 people in the group and I had a couple of students pass and people that were really excited about the course, I was like, okay, well, I should charge like a little something. And so I decided I was going to sell it for $25. So it was $25 for a 3-hour course. And the very first person I went to sell it to, she was so angry with me because she was like, my 2 friends got this for free. So you're telling me that I'm going to have to pay $25 for this course? And I was like, how about $15? And she said, sold. So my very first purchase, I got haggled down. So the first day that I sold it for $15. But this is how fast and how crazy this was. Because people saw people passing and because people were so excited so fast, I made $1,000 the first day I sold it, and I was selling it for $15 a piece. And
That's
that
incredible.
was kind of like the moment my brain just broke in half. I was like, what just happened to me?
That's amazing. That's like, I mean, that I'm sure gave you $1,000 is nice, right? Go buy a smoker for your husband, get that, scratch that itch. But I'm sure that gave you thoughts of like, holy cow, like there's more to be had here. Like $1,000 is great, but in one day, like imagine if I go all in on this, like what could this be? So is that kind of what went through your mind and how did that transpire after that?
There were a lot of emotions really fast because money has always been tight for me. Like my student loan payments were super aggressive because I had private loans. We had just bought a house, just got married. We were in that season of life too. And my husband had been nervous when we bought our house, like, will we make our mortgage? And I was like, no, we've got it. And he was like, I just don't know. And he's always the optimistic one. So, I mean, like I said, things were tight. When I made that $1,000, I was like, what if we make $1,000 every day? Like, what would that life look like? Like, that would be the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. But it was overwhelming in the sense that, like, I'm a one-woman show. I'm selling this on Venmo and Cash App and having to manually send links and talk directly to every single customer. And so that first day, I remember, like, it was like 8 or 9 p.m. and my phone just blowing up, blowing up, blowing up. I'm getting all these DMs on Facebook, and I threw my phone across the room on the couch. And my husband's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I just, like, can't even keep up with all the people that are trying to talk to me right now." I was like, I don't know if I'm built for this. Like, this is too much. Like, I don't have anything other than just, like, Zoom recordings and Venmo. But he was like, we made $1,000 in a day. He's like, take a deep breath. It's going to be fine. I know you're anxious. But I was also, like I said earlier already, like, I was really excited about what I was doing, and it was fun. And I had never super loved being a nurse. And I had only really become a nurse practitioner because I knew someday I wanted to teach, and I thought it would make me a better educator. So, like, loving this business thing really fast was kind of shocking to me. Like, I wasn't prepared for that. But I was ready to dive head first once I realized I liked it.
So you said something earlier that I want to kind of dive into a little bit. I think Kyle's wife had mentioned that you're pretty outspokenly, so I'm hoping not like stepping on any toes here, but you're pretty outspokenly OCD. And you had mentioned earlier that you, when setting up this course, you were like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, it can just be what it is, and we'll see how it goes. So how did you sort of overcome that? Because I'm a little bit OCD too. I'm not like diagnosed or anything, maybe self-diagnosed, but I would, if I were creating a course, that's where I would get stuck. It's like, it's not quite ready. I got to tweak it here, tweak it there, like make it what I want it to be before I put it out there. So how did you kind of overcome that to get that initial course launched?
You know, I think because I got so much validation so fast, I was able to skip over some of those hurdles because, like, the people that I sent it to for free, for example, raved immediately, like, once they actually got into it and started listening. And that was actually where I got my first big, like, influx into my Facebook group, was somebody went to another group that I went to school with, and they're like, just tried this new review. I passed super fast. I thought the exam was easy. And then all of a sudden, like, everybody wants to know, like, who is this person? How do I talk to them? What's going on? For me, I found that my OCD more so came out in the messages and, like, how I corresponded to people and how quickly I corresponded to people, because I won't say it was like life or death, but I had never made any genuine money before. It kind of felt life and death in the beginning. And so I was like, if I don't respond to this message fast enough, I'm going to lose this sale. That was really hard. So then it became like all consuming. So not only was I creating more courses, creating more content, because I immediately started adding to the courses as I was getting all this feedback from students too, but trying to keep up obsessively with the number of messages, requests, content, questions, like, that was a lot, and that became like a full-time job in and of itself.
So did you end up out? Oh, Kyle, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, based on what you initially said for your first tried and true customer, it sounds like maybe sales wasn't what you had always wanted to do either, because they said, hey, I can't do $25, and you're like, 15 free,
Just take
whatever
it,
you
can
want.
have it.
I am not a saleswoman, and that has been the most interesting part of running the business for me, because I was never going to be the person to push you into it. So I'm like, this course might be for you. Here's what I think it could be for you, but I'm not going to be like, this is what you need sort of thing. But what I found, especially in that first year, was the more that I talked about my own journey in nurse practitioner school, and the more I talked about the anxiety I had that nobody addressed, and here's a new resource that you could possibly use, and really leaning into be my authentic self and my mental health platform, it really kind of sold itself in a lot of ways. I know that sounds silly, but people were just like relating to it on such an intense level, especially in the middle of a pandemic where everybody wants support, everybody wants community, etc. It was just kind of lightning in a bottle timing too.
So you had talked about earlier that one of the biggest things that you felt like you were missing from some of the prep courses that you had done was some semblance of confidence at the end of it. Mm-hmm. So what is it that you felt like you were able to bring to the table and insert into your course that it was like, all right, I'm going to put my stamp on this and say, all right, I am not only confident in this product, but you as a nurse going to be a nurse practitioner consumer are also going to be as well?
Well, I think the biggest thing came from kind of what I was just talking about, that transparency, because I was doing review courses where they literally said, like, there's one course in particular I'm thinking of, they don't do this anymore, but they had a slide at the beginning of their slide deck that said test anxiety is not real. If you fail, it's on you. And so even just like opening up my courses in a way of like, hello, I'm Sarah. I have test anxiety. Here are 15 things I've done like that are in my toolbox of how I combat this. And I always worried that I wouldn't have rapport in the space. Like I didn't put my face on my business for the first 6 months. I was very anxious to like be outspoken in a sense of like you physically see me, because I was like, people are going to think I'm too young. How am I going to have any credibility, etc. There's a lot of credibility though that comes from passing your exam in an hour. And so I just like really leaned into that. Like, I'm just like you. I just took this exam. And I was really anxious when I took this exam, and I was still successful, and you can be too. So just reminding people over and over, like, you can absolutely be successful with anxiety because I've already conquered it and done that thing, and now I'm going to show you how to do it. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think your vulnerability also gives you some, a leg up. And I think, a lot of videos even that go viral on TikTok or Instagram, you see go viral because they're somebody like talking about their authentic self in a vulnerable way, and you identify with that and you laugh or you cry or whatever because you're like, that's me, but nobody has talked about it up to this point. And so now I think as people become more vulnerable with the general public, I think people identify with that and want to buy your product because they want to feel that, they want to feel that vulnerability.
Well,
Crushing the exam.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Crushing the exam doesn't hurt either.
Also true.
Yes. Crushing the exam, the top notch on the credibility front. But I also think too, like, COVID really broke the door open on mental health. Like, we've been having this conversation for years. We were talking about Shark Tank before we started the episode. And there was actually a Shark Tank episode where someone is pitching like a telehealth idea for mental health. And they're like, that'll never work sort of thing. So it's interesting, like, even in the last decade, how we've like started to shift. But then once COVID hit and like everybody was trying to figure out like, what does our new world look like? And there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty. And it was a lot to take on. Being able to be at the forefront of that conversation, even in the small realm, was really important to me.
So in the early days, you had talked about, you mentioned if someone brought someone else into your group that you extended to them a discount on the program. Were you reliant on referrals early on, or were you putting some capital back into like marketing and things like that, or were you pretty heavily reliant on word of mouth, nurse to nurse kind of thing?
I love to tell people that we didn't run a single digital ad until we made $1 million in sales. So everything was
Incredible.
word of mouth. Everything was people's excitement. They're like, oh my gosh, I used this thing to pass. You should use it too. And that's actually a lot of leverage that we've had in the institutional space too, like getting in the schools, because students are like, I don't want to use this other product. I'm using Sarah Michelle. So why can't we just use Sarah Michelle? Like, why don't you purchase that for us? You also have to think in this space too, it was a very archaic space before I came in. Like, yes, there were a couple of Facebook reviews, but none of them really like exploded or taken off. And it was a lot of like 60 to 70-year-old women teaching these review courses. So people were also excited just to see like a fresh face in a way, or like a fresh presentation, just a different vibe, maybe would be the best way to put it.
A teacher who wasn't there when the rules were written kind of thing?
Yes. When nurse practitioners came into existence, yes.
Right. So at what point then, you talked about your sort of OCD and how quickly you were responding to people and getting your messaging just right. So at what point, or did you outsource that where you just focused on, I'm going to create the courses, maybe do some other day-to-day stuff, but let somebody else handle the transactional part of the business?
Or scaling?
Both of those things took me a very long time because I was very particular, especially having OCD, with how I wanted things done, how I wanted students talked to, and not only how students were talked to, but how they were cared for. Like, I always wanted to have like the top-notch feel. And so my first branch into having someone help me was my husband. And we decided he was going to be my virtual assistant. That lasted all of like a day and a half because I was just like, you've got to be quicker. Like, you've got to move faster. And he was like, he's so like laissez-faire, super chill, opposite of me. That's why we get along so well. And I was like, this is not working out like this. So he was the first person I hired and also the first person I fired. But he ended up coming back. He did like some bookkeeping and stuff. And he always likes to joke with people. In the acquisition, he was the only person that got let go. But all that being
But you
said,
guys
I
are
got
still married,
sidetracked.
so
Yes, we're still married. Very
so
happily
it worked
married.
out.
Yes, he's starting his own business now, so he's getting to live this too. But I started my business at the end of May, started selling courses that first week of June. And then in November, I had made about $250,000. And I was like, I had a website explode. I had tried to like dabble in a couple of different things to like give me efficiency or give me a little bit of hands off. And I was like, I just really don't know what I'm doing at all. Like I always joke too that I got a trial by fire MBA because I was just like literally throwing spaghetti at the wall all the time and seeing what stuck and seeing what worked. And so I ended up hiring a business coach in November. In my first meeting with her, she was like, I never say this to anyone on the first call. She's like, but by the time I talk to you in 7 days, I need you to have hired someone. She's like, you have to have a virtual assistant. I don't care where you find them. I don't care where you get them, but you have to have help to be able to do all the things that you want to do and grow in the way you want to grow. And so I think starting into business coaching was really the first pivot for me to even start talking about scaling because I was living so in the moment every day of respond to this message, do this transaction, make this post, make this content. It was the first time I was able to like take a step back and be like, okay, if I don't have to do all the inner workings, what would this look like?
So in the span of 5 or 6 months, you made $250,000. I don't want to just like gloss over that.
It was the wildest 6 months of my life.
So I do want to ask, because it sounds like you were pretty, tight-fisted with your money, not in a bad way, but you kind of, it sounds like you had to be. What did you do in those first 6? Like, did you splurge on something maybe you shouldn't have? Because I know if I made $250,000 in 6 months, I'm gonna buy something. Like, I might not go buy a Lamborghini, but I'm gonna buy like a watch or something. So what was your first splurge if you had one?
This is not a fun answer in any capacity, but the student loans were eating me alive. I paid off my student loans. That was our first big thing.
That's a great answer.
What a relief. There's nothing in the world that I wanted more than to have those student loans off my back. And after
Would you mind sharing how much you had in student loans?
I think by the time because I had made a few years of payments, but I think there was like $60,000 or $70,000 left of student loans. Yeah, it was a lot.
As a former Dave Ramsey graduate, I can relate to that feeling.
FPU grad.
Yeah, all the Ramsey listeners or all the Ramsey apologists are shaking their fists right now, like, yeah, let's go.
But I will tell you, when I sold my company, I ended up buying a Bronco, which then I wrapped in glitter pink. So that was like my fun purchase later.
There it is.
A Bronco's not a Ferrari, but it was still
nice.
really fun.
Well, to wrap it in glitter pink, that says,
pretty cool.
Yeah.
I do have pink hair, so.
Very nice. Do you did you buy or was a smoker purchased?
Oh yeah.
Or do you still have the cinder block smoker?
Yeah, no, the cinder block smoker got left at our last house. We were like, we'll just let this be.
Very nice.
Everyone wanted to know, I'm sure.
Yes, they were on a cliffhanger with that one.
So I want to dive in for a second because this is sort of a personal question for me because I have an actuarial background. I'm an actuary by trade. We have a lot of exams. I'm done with them, thank God, but I had maybe like 10 or 12 exams and some other continuing education requirements. And I remember going through that process. And at some point later in the process, the exams in the beginning are everybody has to take them. So the materials have gotten pretty good. But then you go down a path, like you pick what kind of actuary am I, and you go down a
Like a
path.
specialty.
Yeah, and there's like 5 or 6 specialty tracks that you can choose from, and those study materials can be pretty terrible because somebody just did it, and we're like, here they are, and nobody has ever tried to reinvent them because it's like this is what it is, and not as many people use them. So I remember going through this and thinking, man, these are garbage. Like I would love to recreate this. And I kind of got stuck because I was like, well, these questions are based on textbooks. And if I'm like doing study videos where I'm reading out of these textbooks, like are there copyright laws that I'm breaking? Or like if I create a PowerPoint, like there's just so many questions I had. Were those humps that you encountered that you were able to overcome, or like how did you navigate? Like I guess copyright laws is where I got stuck. So like how did you navigate that?
That was something in particular that gave me a lot of anxiety and overwhelm. I don't know why I was like hyper focused on copyright, but just for perspective, started in May. In August, I finally got an accountant and became an LLC. Like I didn't even do like the most basic of business stuff. I was like, oh, like I might need some help. But then my next stop, like the very next place I went to, was an IP lawyer because I was like, how do I protect myself? How do I make sure, like, what's public knowledge? Like, what exists in the public domain? And a lot of it, luckily for me, like, medical knowledge is very much public domain sort of knowledge. But the holdup was definitely the images that were used. And so we went through and we scraped all of my courses of all of the images. I had to send links for every single image. They would check if I could actually use that. And then if not, I had to replace it. And that took me several months to do. And it was the biggest expense in my business at that moment. But it was worth it for me because I was starting to see a vision of like, I want to create more. I want to do this in the right way. So I just have to have experts help me do this. And so my IP team, we were best buddies. We were always hand in hand, emailing back and forth. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this?
And
luckily,
I think
an easier one to answer.
Yeah, well, I think I've found that that's kind of the answer for a lot of the more complicated questions that I've asked on this show for several guests is when you don't know, like somebody knows. So you got to find the person that knows. And I mean, there might be a monetary investment, a time investment in like getting it right, but the solution is there. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know somebody or find somebody that knows what you don't. Or take the time to learn it, but it's probably a faster route.
I had no time for that.
Yeah.
I'm like, here's the links. Take them from me.
For every obscure question out there, there is a Sarah Michelle for it.
In that particular niche.
So you talk about the removal of that copyright material being an expense and probably kind of a time sink. And, we could look at that at face value as kind of a setback or a challenge. What other challenges or what other big challenges would you say you had to face or overcome to get to where you are currently?
My biggest challenge right out of the gate, like newbie business owner, I have no idea what I'm doing, was the website. Because we just did not realize, me and my husband, we kind of researched together. We wanted to create a website. We knew that was the next move. We didn't realize the investment that would need to be made to have a good, legitimate website. And so we thought like, oh, we'll get a deal. Like this guy, he's got a template. He'll throw it together for us. It was $2,000. But you also have to think too, like $2,000 was a lot of money for me at the time to feel like I was investing in the business. Even with paying off my student loans, which we did in chunks, like it was still intimidating for me. But it came like 2 days before the website was supposed to launch. Everything was supposed to be put on subscriptions. That was the other thing. Like when you bought the Zoom links, you got forever access. Obviously, that's not a great business model. So subscription was the pivot in the way that I wanted to go. And then 2 days before it was supposed to launch, the guy called me up and he told me it was impossible to do subscriptions. And he had never agreed to that and like all this crazy stuff. And so it was really, really hard to be counting on having a website to kind of do work for me. I've been like ready for that for months already. Because like I said, my phone's just blowing up constantly and I was doing it all by myself. But I also hyped up my students for that and I put off sales for that. And I'm like, don't buy yet, buy in a couple of days when I have the website. And then when I tried to get him to give me a refund, I found out in the contract that if I wanted to refund, I would have to go to arbitration in Texas where he lived. It was like this whole drawn out thing. It was not worth the $2,000. I mean, it might have been worth it on principle because he was so nasty to me. But that was really like the first hurdle. And the first time I was like, oh, like I got in over my head, and like we're lucky it was just $2,000, right? But what if this happens again and I'm just not aware? Because I mean, we signed that contract and we felt like we read it and understood it, but we really didn't. And so it made me a little bit more weary moving forward of how would we choose vendors and what would that look like? And that's also why I decided to do business coaching, because I was like, I really just need someone with, like we were just talking about, the expertise that's done this before me. I think of business coaching like a cheat code in a lot of ways. Like, oh, they've already created a website. Oh, they already know a marketing team. Oh, they've already vetted these people. Like, it was a real leg up really fast for me.
Yeah, find
one of those ideas where you kind of essentially get what you pay for.
Yeah, I definitely got what I paid for with that website, dude.
Yeah, find somebody who's done it and just do what they did.
Yes.
So let's take your story to today. So now we're we're in November right now of after launching your course. You've got $250,000 in sales, you got a website up, you're starting to get some traction, you're scaling up. Things are looking good. You've passed the $1 million mark. At some point, within a couple of years, I don't know if you were approached or you approached somebody, how the sale kind of came about, but within a couple of years, you sold your business, and that's crazy that happened so fast. But can you kind of just give us some insight of like, how did that happen? How did that come to pass?
Yes. So long story short, as you know, my business is called Sarah Michelle MP Reviews, and I had started doing business coaching, and that just like it had come up again and again. Like, you can't sell a personal brand, like, because you're selling yourself essentially. Like, how does that work? And so there was a lot of talk of if I should rebrand, and I reached out to a branding expert. And she was like, well, before we talk about rebranding, like, what is your 5-year plan? What is your 10-year plan? But even in those moments, I was still kind of living in the moment, trying to run this business and figure it out day to day. And so she had suggested, I know this growth strategist, reach out to him, make a plan with him, like kind of fill yourself out a little bit. And then if you still want to rebrand, we can talk about rebranding. I was like, okay, cool. And so I reached out to this growth strategist and we started working together. And me and my husband were really honestly just curious. Like, this was the end of 2022 and we were making a lot of money really fast. We were like, what is this worth? We're not really ed tech. We're just an education company. We're very much a personal brand. Like, is that of value to anyone? What would the multiples even look like? And so our growth strategist at the time was like, well, the only way to get a sense of valuation, because it's kind of like real estate, it's whatever someone's willing to pay for it, right? Is to put some teasers out there. So he's like, let's just do an exercise. Let's not intend on selling, because that wasn't the goal at the time. Because in our 5-year plan was maybe we will sell, but we weren't like sold on selling by any means. But just put some teasers out, see what people think, get an idea evaluation, and then we can make some more educated decisions about how we want to move forward, sort of thing. And in probably the week or so before I started working with this growth strategist, I had someone reach out from the company that now owns mine, and she just wanted to talk to me about a podcast. And I was like, no offense, I already have a podcast. I don't want to do a nurse practitioner podcast for you all too. But they had just basically, she worked for Blueprint, but before Blueprint, she had worked for Roche Review, and Roche Review had been acquired by Blueprint. And so just like totally incidentally to this whole process, she told me how great the acquisition was, how they now had all these new resources to do stuff like the podcast. They wanted to enter into the nursing space, all this sort of stuff. And so when we started sending out teasers, I said, why don't you just send one to Blueprint? I was like, I really like the vibe I got from the random lady I talked about this podcast with. And obviously they're acquiring companies because they just acquired Roche Review. And when we sent teasers out, some were to like private equity companies, because we were kind of feeling too like do we want to infuse ourselves with a lot of capital and become a really big business where we add on like LSAT, MCAT, etc., and become full service? Or would I rather stay small and be absorbed up by another company that doesn't have a nursing vertical or has a very small one today? And to be really blunt and transparent, I hated talking to the private equity people. I mean, like, it wasn't my vibe, and I don't think I wanted to grow in that way. Like, I wanted to be able to live my life without my business running my life all the time. But then when we talked to Blueprint, they just, like, pulled out all the stops from the beginning. Like, they showed up to the meeting, and, like, their whole executive team was there, and, like, 4 or 5 members of their private equity firm was there, because they're also owned a little bit by private equity. So they showed up. They had a really good vibe. I really liked them. They really liked me. And the CEO of Blueprint, it was the founder of the LSAT portion of the business. So we very much connected on like a the founder level, which you're not really going to find for many CEOs. And so I just felt like it was a perfect fit, and we had a lot of synergy. So much so that I was like, we didn't go into this intending to sell, but I kind of want to sell. Like, if we were going to sell, like, this is the perfect people to do it with. The market was in a really good place, and we liked the valuation that we got. And so it just seemed like all the pieces were coming together, like this would be the right move. Hopefully all that makes sense. It's hard to like kind of explain without getting lost, but
No, that's great. Thank you for that. So you have sold your company. Can you kind of talk about like maybe the level of autonomy that you're able to still carry with your day-to-day operations, and what does that kind of look like? Like, what does a day in the life of Sarah Michelle look like now post-sale?
So I am their chief nursing officer, which is very, very fancy title. I don't know if I always I don't know if I can always take that on. Like, it feels a little too fancy for me. But I essentially run the entire nursing vertical. You know, we have our established nurse practitioner products. Rosh also has some nurse practitioner products. So we're working on like how do all those intermesh together now, which is fun. And then we're expanding into true nursing, like people that are taking the NCLEX RN, NCLEX PN, because we want to be able to help our students all the way throughout their journey. So when you start as a nursing student, a lot of students will take entrance exams. Like, we'd like to have stuff for entrance exams, for nursing students, for various certifications in between becoming a nurse and a nurse practitioner, and then of course all the nurse practitioner specialties. That will take a little bit of time to build, but I feel like my job today is very much like helping form and set the vision and kind of being like the insider knowledge of the nursing vertical, because I've lived all of these things myself. And then using all of Blueprint's resources, because obviously they were way bigger than we were. We were a teeny tiny, like mighty but lean sort of team. But now using their resources to really grow and grow fast, which that's the fun part.
So are you working like full-time hours?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
For Blueprint?
Hours. Yeah, and it was kind of a bizarre scenario, because by the time that like we sold, when we first started working with the growth strategist, like within a couple of weeks, I found out I was pregnant. By the time that we officially sold, I was 8.5 months pregnant, which was a wild journey all of its own.
Great timing, though.
My husband always says I nail timing. He was like, you have the most impeccable timing. Like, you started your business in COVID. We sold at the perfect time, all this stuff. But I ended up having unexpectedly a daughter with a heart defect. And so August through the end of the year that I sold, I was pretty much absent. And it was really nice to have the buffer of like knowing people were taking care of my students and my business while I just could not possibly be available. And so last year in 2023 was my first full year working for Blueprint and figuring out my role, my responsibilities. So some of it too has been a learning curve to shift from being a CEO to being a CNO. But I'm like super supported by the CEO of Blueprint, and I really love everything that I do.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's good.
So you are continuing with your regular working hours with a high level of autonomy within the new infrastructure, but you've also been doing your own podcast, which is pretty cool. I would say that my wife is a near religious listener of that.
That's fun.
And, with that, do you kind of want to talk about, all the different ways that people can interact with, your podcast, all of your course material for all of because I know that there are going to be some nurses out there listening that have been kicking around the idea of doing nurse practitioner school. And spoiler alert, it's kind of a Wild West. Like you get into
absolutely a Wild West.
You get into your program and then it's like, all right, buckle up, good luck, here we go.
Yeah, there's definitely there's a lot of levels of autonomy in nurse practitioner programs. Like, how do they help you find clinicals? Do they not? How do they set up your courses? All that is a lot to navigate. But as far as finding me, I feel like in the nursing corner of the internet, you can find me almost everywhere. We do weekly YouTube videos. We do bi-weekly podcast episodes. Our Facebook community on the nurse practitioner side has over 30,000 students in it. So that really is a great place of support, seeing what other people do, and we do learning posts there. So like every day we're going to learn about diabetes today. Here's 7 questions about diabetes. Did you know, did you not know, sort of thing. And then of course, like when you're ready to prepare for boards or you're in clinicals and you just need a little bit of a confidence boost in that knowledge you've already been learning, that's when our courses really help. Like our crash course, for example, is still that Q&A format that I was talking about earlier, where you can test yourself at home. And then for people that need something a little bit deeper, need the lectures, we have courses for that too. And then we have a live study group as well, and that's my personal favorite. Like that's like my baby, I feel like, that I created, because we talked about a lot, I couldn't find what I wanted. And so literally I just sat down one day and I'm like, if I could have had the perfect review course, well, not that even they'll be perfect, but as close to perfect as possible, what would that have looked like? And that's what the live study groups are. It's 5 weeks. We hold you accountable. You're able to ask nurse practitioners questions at any time. You get all the courses, the Q bank, etc. Now, as far as following along with me personally, which is also important to me, I post a lot on Instagram at Sarah Michelle MP. And later this year, I hope to be releasing my memoir, which I'm very excited about, because obviously the last few years have been a crazy journey and people don't always understand it from the outside. So between like creating a business, selling a business, and then being a nurse practitioner to a heart baby, like there's a lot of stuff going on there, and I'm very excited about that too. And I'm doing some keynote speeches this year too, so I'll be at a couple of nurse practitioner conferences. There's a lot of moving pieces. It's fun.
Well, you're certainly not bored. Can you kind of can you lay out for us where you're speaking so anyone who's in the area could go see you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be speaking. I'll be doing the keynote at Salt Lake City next month on March, I believe it's 15th, at the Emergency Nurse Practitioner Conference. I will also, hopefully, I'm trying to like manifest this into happening, be speaking in July at the OCD conference. I think that would be really fun, but we're still like working out the details of that. And then in September of this year, just this morning, I agreed I'm going to be speaking at the AMMP conference, where it's basically Missouri, the state of Missouri. It's their nurse practitioner conference. And then there's a couple more in the works that are coming. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll be able to check me out. And then, of course, I'll be at AAMP this year in June, because all the MPs go to AAMP.
And I'll mention for listeners who listen to this later that it is currently, at the time of this recording, February of 2024. We haven't launched yet, so that first speaking deal, March 15th, we may or may not have launched your episode by then, so listeners may be SOL on that one, but we'll get all the
Maybe
feature
you'll find
ones
on YouTube,
Yeah, catch it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving us some time today, like you have. So for every guest that we have a listener question. So for all of the listeners out there, please send in your questions to kyle@witnessbusiness.com. Now, this question is a little bit different because it did not come through the email. It came in over a text message from my wife. So this week's listener question is from my wife because she's been so excited to hear that we've been able to get you on. So the question that she had for you is, what is your favorite memory of seeing a student out in the real world that you've helped?
I think my favorite memory, hands down, I'm going to talk about a nursing student instead, just because it was like so meaningful to me. One of my like very first teaching experiences, I was actually almost thrown out of nursing school for having anxiety, which is like a whole side conversation. So it was very important to me that when I became an educator myself, that I always tended to my students that had anxiety. And I had this student who I could just like see her outside the room panicking. And I'm like, this is your first clinical. Like, all you got to do is like go in there, say, hey, listen to some lungs and come back out. Like, this is not a big ordeal. And she's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm too nervous. And I was like, all right, let's take a walk. Let's take a lap. So we walked around the unit together. I was like, okay, run me through the process. Like, when you walk in, what are you going to say? Once you get through that, like, how are you going to assess them? Like, what are the things you want to check out? So we just ran through that whole process. We ended up taking 2 or 3 laps going through her plan. And I was like, okay, I'm going to stand in the door and we can do it together. But I have confidence in you. You just told me you knew everything that you needed to know to be able to walk in that room. But I'll stand in here and I'll be like your support person, your cheerleader in the background. She walked in. She did a great job. But she really struggled that semester of like, do I almost like in the same way have the confidence to be a nurse? Like, can I actually do this job? And so it was so cool for me to see her as a real deal nurse a couple of years ago. Because, you know, like when you do those first couple of clinicals and I ended up leaving my teaching job, like you don't know if these people finish or not. So it was so fun for me to see her. Nurse Practitioner was the coolest story. My favorite one to tell is we had a student who failed their exam 20 years ago. Literally like 1999 failed their exam, which I guess is more like 25 years ago now. And after doing our courses, she passed her exam. And that was so cool because she never had the confidence to do it again. Like she couldn't make herself, like bring herself to do it. So for her to do the life study group and pass, like that stuff lights me up. Like that's cool stuff.
Talk about never giving up, right?
Yeah, amen. And she was like, I just heard about this new review. Like, who are you? And I'm like, I got you. I got your back.
Yeah, like kudos to you on that one because that's taking somebody who probably had just given up and then saw a glimmer of hope in your course and in the success she saw maybe some from some peers. So yeah, kudos to you for getting
well, the beginning was so
back.
fun because I talked to every student, so I knew every story. Like I had that personal connection with all these people, which obviously helped me build my business, but like it was really like it was so validating for me.
Yeah, not sustainable, but yeah,
no,
really
not
cool
sustainable at all. But in the beginning, it was sweet.
Yeah.
Well, we do know you couldn't turn him over to that first virtual assistant you had. We know that.
Yeah, no, Ben had to go. Couldn't be trusted.
Well, Sarah Michelle, we greatly appreciate having you on the show. Thank you for being your vulnerable self to us on the show, but also to all the students who know and love you and love your courses and love everything you're doing. So again, thanks for coming on the show. I'm sure this will be very inspiring, not just to like nurses, but to business people in general. Somebody who has an idea and doesn't know what to do, but to see somebody at the age of 25 take an idea, run with it, and at the age of 28, you sold the business. Like yeah. It's an amazing story. So congratulations on that, and we hope to see more of Sarah Michelle in the future.
Thank you so much for inviting me, by the way. I was so excited. I was like, ooh, talk about the business. I'm ready.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for people that, I mean, obviously this is an audio medium, but for the people who, do see it on video, you'll see right behind her head, it says in giant letters, "You will pass." So, thank you for taking the time with us. And it's the Sarah Michelle podcast that they can also hear more about what you're doing.
Yeah, it's called Becoming a Stress-Free Nurse Practitioner.
Becoming a Stress-Free Nurse Practitioner. Love it. And I noticed you called your student in your story just a minute ago a real deal nurse. So love that. You're the real deal.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you both so much.